Good evening, and welcome to the Caring View, the online health and social care platform, free to access to absolutely everybody. I'm so sorry, I was putting my phone on silent then. I'm having terrible internet problems tonight. I'm trying to turn anything off that is using up my bandwidth. Before we get started, don't forget to hit that like button, hit that subscribe, give us a follow. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, X, Instagram. You should be watching us on all of our platforms. Interestingly, we are also going live with our podcast on YouTube. We're just waiting for the team there to get that hosted for us. So you will be able to listen to our podcast on Amazon, on Apple, on Spotify, on YouTube. You can pretty much catch us everywhere. Best place to get us, though, is www.thecaringview.co.uk. Everything we do here at The Caring View is completely free. We do not charge you for accessing our free resources, for accessing our podcast. There is none of this Patreon. Go and follow our spice links. Nothing like that here at The Caring View. It is all completely free to access. And the way that we are able to do that is through our fabulous sponsors. So I am going to just spend a couple of minutes just giving them the huge shout out. So we first off have Prosperwell, the UK's leading digital marketing agency. Please do go check them out. Toby from Smooth Toby, Tea with Toby. He is a mastermind when it comes to marketing. And if you are wanting to up your marketing game with your social care business, please do go and use them. We also have CBAT Training. You may know them for their training. You may know them from their insanely ripped director, if you follow him on Facebook, who is now bodybuilding. It's incredible. But do go and check out CBAT for all of your healthcare training needs. And we also have Attis Care by Attis Insurance Brokers. We hate insurance and social care. It's the bane of all our life. Attis Care are here to make it easy for us. We have some new sponsors coming up over the next couple of months, and we are excited to share the work we are doing with them. But for now, we just want to thank our sponsors for making this possible each and every week for everybody. Mark, I am going to run out of breath. We have been off a couple of weeks with annual leave and a bit of skiving. How are you?
Yes, not too bad. It does feel like a long time, but yeah, you were enjoying some well-deserved annual leave. I was laying in bed, practically dying from a viral infection. So I'd much rather have been on holiday. But yeah, no, I'm not too bad. So yeah.
Well, it's good to be back. For those who didn't know or didn't attend, Mark and I were at the Care Forum this morning in London. Really great learning event, loads of knowledge shared, not just by ourselves, but from the audience as well, and really good conversations going on around the CQC. We want to keep that CQC conversation going, so please do get in touch if there are updates that you have about the CQC that you want to share. We will get them shared out across the sector. So tonight, full show tonight, which is really exciting. We are talking around developing and maintaining an inclusive culture for better recruitment and retention. Now, what a mouthful. What an absolute mouthful. But it's a mouthful we should be saying over and over and over again. How do we make our organizations more inclusive? We are joined by some fabulous guests tonight. So I want to start with Dudley. Dudley, who are you and where are you from?
Well, I'm Dudley Sawyer, and I work across health and social care. Primarily with people care services, consulting and developing and support with strategies and training. I also work alongside Care Vision, who are a software marketing company or a software company which provides care for care homes and other organizations across care. I am the co-chair for Skills for Care Race and Equity Reference Group as well. And I probably do various other things with organizations such as LCAS, supporting over 16 London boroughs and providers across London and other things as well. There you go.
Okay.
Where do you find the time, Dudley? Where
Exactly.
So from Dudley to Vivian. Vivian, welcome to your show. To the show, first time on. Lovely to have you. Who are you and where are you from?
Okay, well, the first thing I'll say is I'm not as busy as Dudley. I don't know what he does. He obviously does not have a life. I have a life. That's all I'll say. Well, I'm Vivian Zawacha. I'm Group Operations Director for Future Care Group. We've got 18 care homes across basically the southwest of England. And we predominantly look after the elderly. I'm a nurse by trade, a mental health nurse by trade. And as I was saying earlier, I feel that I'm constantly being judged for my mental health nursing. So, but I enjoy working with colleagues and with my colleagues in particular, building inclusive cultures. It's one of the things I'm hoping to drive more and more, particularly with the push for overseas colleagues to join our workforce.
I mean, 100%. So obviously, I have nursing homes that I work for, and we have a lot of. Well, I say a lot. I think the sector has a lot of overseas recruits now. We have a lot of international workers in this country, and I think it's a spectacular thing. But actually, how often do we stop and go, how do we support these people better? How do
Yeah,
we make life amazing for them here? And how do we develop
absolutely.
them like we would develop our team? And I hate to say our team, but the people who live here originally,
Yeah,
how do we develop them the same way? So really
definitely.
interesting, Vivian, to hear what you've got to say on that later in the show. Paula Cashmore, hello, welcome back to the show. It seems like forever since we've seen you. For those who don't know you, give us a bit of an introduction. Who are you and where are you from?
Okay, I'm Paula, an independent care quality consultant. I'm a registered nurse by trade. I've still got my registration. I voluntary coordinator with National Association of Care and Support Workers, with promoting the voluntary care professional register, and I do some employability mentoring with the Prince's Trust. And with some of our non-executive directors of NACAS, we're trying to move forward and work with people who are trying to stop the exploitation of sponsored workers. So it's, and that is very key in developing that inclusive culture as well.
No, 100%. And the one thing I didn't mention at the beginning of this show, and I think actually is quite important for this one, it's another angle in which we can showcase the way that we are making our cultures more inclusive in our organizations, is starting June 24th is Care Home Open Week. So we have Care Home Open Week coming up at the end of this month, and we always think about opening our doors, showing off our bedrooms, look at our kitchen, but actually for the local communities, for people who live in areas that the demographics are very, very mixed and vibrant and wonderful, or for those communities that are using a lot of or inviting over a lot of overseas recruits, Care Home Open Week. Let's start showing people what we do to make them to keep them supported and to make them feel supported. Mark.
Yes. Well, thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for giving up your Tuesday evening to join us. I've just shared the link to Care Home Open Week in the comments. Just a reminder, it's not just care homes. Supported living, home care can also get involved. So definitely a great celebration of everything social care. So I was listening to you all do your introductions and kind of your thoughts around inclusive culture. And I guess for me, it was going to be, how do you define an inclusive culture? What is an inclusive culture to each of you? Dudley, I'll come to you first, then Vivian, and then Paula.
So very interesting, because when you mention the word culture, it sometimes divides how people think. So I'm going to break it down to two parts. So first and foremost, when we think about the external culture of an organization, it's about how the company is, and it's more related to the recruitment, how it looks like, and people are attracted to the culture of a company. You hear about a company, you understand what happens for it. The other part too is the internal culture of a company, which is more related to the retention and the belonging of being inside a company. So if you break them down, how people are, how they're attracted in the first instance, and then part two is the actual internal culture. So how people feel that they belong. I think this plays a part, and we know, going back to the topic around recruitment retention, how do we tackle both? So really having both ends is really key. So that's how I would explain people when they come to me and say, what's culture? What's culture mean? So as I said, that breaks it down. And I think the internal culture seems to be really kicking off really a lot more, because retention seems to be more of a big issue, especially we talk about overseas recruits, we talk about the different demographics, and protected characteristics that work across health and social care, which we know is unique and the most, as I can say to everyone, the most diverse sector probably in the country. How do we keep them there? How do we make them feel that they belong? What have we got in place? And I think that speaks volumes. And I'm sure when we speak further, you'll see how CQC have looked at this and how important it is for them in the assessment framework as well.
Thank you very much. Before I bring you in, Vivian, Do you think the pandemic has altered how we develop culture, Dudley? So I think there will be some services that had a ramp up of recruitment, got people in through the door, probably didn't have them the same as kind of the team before. Do you think that that's kind of, do you think we're now seeing the tail end of that? That just popped into my head just based on a conversation that we had last night at the Care Forum.
I think it has. It's quite interesting because I think there was this whole wave of, you know, did we feel that people were taking the care staff seriously during the pandemic? I know I was privileged to be able to go into care organizations, and they felt that even managers didn't respect what they'd gone through. You know, the government never paid us any money or support the care staff. So I think it's been an ongoing spiral. And as we can see with the actual vacancies in sort of like the sector, it really hasn't helped attract, which we had hoped. We thought the pandemic would have done, having this valuable sort of career, which, you know, is future proof because everyone is always going to need care at some point. But it hasn't really stemmed from there. In fact, it's brought about more of an exodus, people being burnt out, not feeling valued, not being belonging, you know, to the point where we know now where we look at overseas staff to actually plug some of the holes in there. So sadly, what we could have done at that time from the pandemic hasn't really worked, and we are where we are now and having conversations like this, which is sad to say, but important in order to kickstart and solve what we all know is the case of much valued needed people on board in sort of like the sector.
Definitely. Thank you very much. Vivian, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, just using that as a platform to talk about culture for me. You know, health and social care is such an emotive industry. It's based on emotions. It's based on people coming to us under distress, and because of that, the way we lead our teams needs to be more emotionally intelligent and intuitive to the way we work. So because of that, I find that when I look at culture, I try and understand what are the underpinning values of culture? What does culture really mean to somebody? Is it you recognizing them as an individual, first and foremost, as a human being? Because it's human beings looking after human beings, right? Secondly, then I think, okay, is it also understanding how they want to feel valued and respected? And, you know, we talk about overseas carers a lot, but how about the local carers? Because in many ways, they can feel like they're the underdogs because they suddenly think, so it's everything's about, you know, the international recruitment scene. What are we doing about that? But what is it within your organization that you practice, that you make available, that allows each and every person, that colleague, that resident, that relative, that business partner, that they feel valued, so that they feel they're integrated, they're part of your organization, and they can work with you to draw the best outcomes for everybody. Because I think we often drive to say, oh, it's about the resident, it's everything's about the resident. Trust me, if I, as a colleague, am not happy, I will not be providing the best care possible. Therefore, you know, I think organizational culture is really important to understand what drives the organization, what is the personality of the organization. Because what people forget is every organization has a personality. And what underpins that personality and how is that driven further down into how everybody's working and integrating and collaborating to have really good outcomes in the community that they're living in. So, I mean, in a nutshell, for me, culture is so many things, and some of them are intangible, you know, and some of them are very physical. But it's understanding how all of those play together and create a dynamic that creates a really good community for myself and my colleagues to work in.
Thank you very much. I really like that explanation. And I think you're spot on in the terms of that it can't always be about the people we support, because actually, if we don't have a staff team, then actually you're not going to have any people to support because there's nobody going to be there to support them. So thank you very much for that. Paula, what about you? What is culture to you?
I love Vivian's description of the culture being the personality of the environment. And for me, inclusive culture is that workplace operation where everybody can work to their best ability. the fact that you may have different abilities, different races, different beliefs, different experience, all pulling together as a team, partnership, supporting each other. And again, opposite of inclusion is exclusion. So nobody being excluded on the basis of anything, whether it's a protected characteristic or just a personality, something like that.
I'm not going to lie, there's some personalities I'd love to not protect, if I'm completely honest. I'm going to go put the milkshake up later on tonight, I think, and go on the prowl. No, I'm teasing. I do not promote violence whatsoever.
But if they worked in your service, Adam, you'd include them, wouldn't you?
Of course I would. Of course I would. No, I totally agree with what everyone's saying. And, you know, I'm sat here from a cisgendered white male perspective, you know, and I think, well, nothing really, you know, affects me, but I also come from the LGBTQIA plus community. So I start thinking, well, actually, there are parts of my culture that I would love to be reflected, but I come as a cisgendered white male homosexual man. I have it really easy compared to the rest of my community. You know, there's a lot of people in my community who do not get the benefits, do not get the support, do not get the acceptance that I get, because I was born with white privilege, and I'm not afraid to say that. And I need to do more to make sure that our internal cultures around LGBTQIA plus includes everyone, includes absolutely everybody from all walks of life. And that's what, for me, culture means. It's just seeing people as people, like Vivian said, and that is who we are at the end of the day. We are just human souls on this planet, trying to go through life, to love each other, and just be happy. You know, someone once asked me, what do you want to achieve in life? And I said, to live. That is literally it. I don't want to achieve riches, or, I mean, it would be nice, but actually most important to me is to live, and we can only do that by loving each other, and that's so important for us moving forwards. I want to talk around and try to be all positive then. I want to talk about challenges now, though. And what are some of the common challenges that companies face when trying to develop? I'm going to split it into a two-part question. They're the worst sort of questions, but I'm going to do it. So, challenges to develop a workplace, inclusive workplace culture, and then maintaining it, because it's really, really easy to. June this month is Pride Month. So I know that I'm going to go to Home Bargains and look at one tiny little shelf with rainbow lollipops and a few little things going, woo, you know, Pride Month. And then July will come and everything will be stripped off and it'll be back to being sun cream or something. It's really easy to do something like that. But how do we make real change, and then how do we embed that? I'm going to come to Vivian first.
For me, it's cultures are led by the leaders. So if you as leaders understand your vision and values, first of all, and that's why you create them, right? Because they form a framework. And if you understand those and then use them as a baseline to create the culture, and it starts with you understanding your people, you know, and developing it means, first of all, there's leadership commitment, number one. And you have to be able to articulate that vision so that each and every person, no matter who they are, does not think I am just a, because the word just a already says that person is minimized. They feel, well, I am an important part, you know. There's that, I remember there's that thing on NASA when somebody says, I'm putting somebody on the moon. You want somebody to say, I am part of making sure a resident is having the best outcome and they're having fun. And, you know, you talked about LGBTQ and being Pride Month. One of the things I sincerely detest is everybody talking about Pride Month during June. I mean, what the hell? We're all still going to be the same people in July and in December and in May, right? So the underpinning thing is leadership commitment. It's so important that the leaders are the ones that are buying into that vision and value and how they want people to be treated. How I treat Dudley is important because Dudley will feel valued by me. How I treat Mark is the same. It should not be any different. Underneath that, so that my other people can also talk, is I feel training is important, and not training that is e-learning, E-learning's great, I can go and type in. I'm great at that. And I'll even do it looking like that and thinking, oh, that's what's happening on EastEnders, right? So it's not about e-learning, it's about face-to-face training. And we're not investing that at the moment. Why are we not doing it? I'm guilty of it. I'm the first person to say, do you know what? In the past, I've been busy saying, oh, that's on the back burner. Then I had a eureka moment when I realized that when I was seeing how my internal colleagues, my local colleagues were working with overseas colleagues, and I use that just as an example, there was a lack of understanding. And I brought in training that was face-to-face, that gave examples, true examples of things that showed how you can embrace the other person. And I found that it created the right platform for them to say, right, how do we treat each other? How do you think you should be treating this individual? And it helped create knowledge, which is really important. And as you know, with CQC, if you don't have it written down, it ain't happening. So we had to.
Mm-hmm. Oh, sorry, my internet got then. Sorry, Vivian. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's right. No, that's fine. So I'm sure Dudley is going to go on about this because he reminds me on a regular basis, Vivian, you have to make sure you demonstrate this habit. You have to write it down. You have to do this. And we have this conversation. I'm like, but sometimes it's not tangible. So, it's all of that. And also, obviously, policy and practices. And we are trying to kind of change how we hire our individuals to include different people on those panels. So there's a lot of things that we can do, but I don't want to take everybody's thunder because Paula might have a different way of doing it.
And honestly, I just want to agree with everything that you said. And Mark and I are really keen to keep reminding people of this. But, there is the quality statement from the CQC under well-led, which is shared direction and culture. And I will read it out again. We have a shared vision, strategy, and culture. This is based on transparency, equity, equality, and human rights, diversity, inclusion, engagement, and understanding challenges and needs of people and our communities in order to meet these. And it is so important. It is so important. I'm so glad you mentioned training, Vivian. Training vision, but with the training, I'm also really keen to explore different training angles. So instead of having a training session, can we do a bit of a fun game during a team session or in peer supervision? Can we do training that way? Can we strip back this idea that training is in a classroom with a chalkboard?
Exactly.
And can we actually just learn at any point during our working day and log that as some learning time? I think really, really insightful stuff, Vivian. Dudley, is Vivian right? Are you going to bombard us with more? And should we be writing it down all the time?
I'm going to leave Vivian to do all that on that. I think I'm going to. So I'm going to come from two angles. So obviously, I think from being a care home owner myself, understanding on the staff, people on the ground level, culture is so hugely important, but also the understanding of culture and what it means, because lots of people don't actually understand what it is. And so people want to feel that they belong. They say that a lot with, understanding culture. It's understanding things such as experiences, beliefs, actions, and then obviously the end result of results, as we always look at the CQC result, of course. But actually, for someone to stay in an organization is hugely important. And a lot of the training I've done, I always go around the room and ask people how long they've been in an organization, just to find out what's kept them there, what's kept them to belong. And actually, you get to find out when companies have got masses of high turnovers, why haven't they stayed? And you still understand the culture, and you understand the culture of an organization isn't great. So really taking that as really evidence to the leaders of the organization is important. I always say the leader of the organization also sets the tone of the organization as well. And I think if we look at culture is one of the strong points in which you can strengthen your workplace. And I'm finding I'm doing a lot of work now at more a senior level. I've done lots of work speaking or trying to speak with the Home Office, CQC around the culture, and this is around international recruitment, but also as well about the culture of people being in organizations. You spoke about actually the new assessment framework. One of the things that CQC actually put down as well is talking about looking at human rights under the new framework. And they mentioned looking at areas of fairness, dignity, respect, equality, and autonomy. And with this, they get to speak to feedback from staff and leaders in the organization, but also as well, they look at the patients and people experiencing their care services. So we know that protected characteristics are there, but then if now CQC are saying, are you matching this? So we know that protected characteristics covers various different characteristics. So how are we matching? How are we trying to do this? And I think if I really wanted to start to really scare sort of providers, as always, to start with, actually, you have a right to work against discrimination and to be inclusive in your services. And that's a legal right. If I want to scare people, we can go to the Equality Act 2010 or break it down for you. But I think it's highly important to understand, if you are now thinking about it was just a nice to have, actually CQC are now coming down, knocking on your door, actually measuring it. In some cases, which I relate to, local authorities have been pulled up, as well as care homes and care providers, on not actually meeting the cultural needs of their clients and service users. So now it's becoming an area which is ever so important. And going back to why we're here, it's now may make the difference of why you leave or stay in an organization.
Yeah, definitely.
So, before I come to you, Paula, I want to ask a serious question without, and I am concentrating. I'm trying to look in the background because I want to get my facts right before I say this, because it's very easy for regulators and other providers, and me and the regulator, we're like this now. You know, we get on, we're cool, you know, we're chill.
Good
I love the
for
regulator.
you.
You know, they do what they do. But it's really easy for an external party to go, you must be more inclusive. You must have, you know, more inclusive culture. You must be more diverse. You must have this. You must have that. And I'm just having a look at the board at CQC because this is what I want to do. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 people on the board at CQC. From my count, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's 4 women in that board. And I can only see one person who is not white presenting. And they are our regulator telling us that we need to be more diverse, we need to have more inclusive culture. But for all of those top positions, they are all white Caucasian people. How can we look at a board like that of a regulator? And this is not just them; it's the NHS, it's everywhere else. Like, you know, think snowy white peaks. It's all of that. How do we as a sector go, actually, yeah, we're going to get on board with this if we can't see it at the top? And if we can't see it at the top and change as a sector, how are people to see themselves in these upper positions if no one else is actually going, but you can actually achieve this because look at who is achieving it? At the minute, for me, it just seems very lip service. And again, that's coming from a Caucasian cisgendered man, but that's how I would perceive it if I was of one of these minority groups. If I was a woman, if I was a person of color, I'd be going, well, that's cute and all, but you've got 4 women on your board of 14 people. Surely this should be like a 50-50 split right now. We're just not there.
Yeah, I think Adam, one of the things, sorry, Adodi, one of the things I've noticed, and I find it often in my community now, I'll talk about myself personally, is when I start saying, oh, this is what I do, they're like, what? You're not a nurse? Really? You're not a nurse? You're what? And it amazes them that it is possible to be functioning at an exec and a strategic level where you're actually influencing how the organization is driven, how the organization operates for each and every single member of that community. And I go back to the word community. And I can tell you that for me, it was one of those things that I kept on saying, will I ever get there? I don't think so. And I'm not an ambitious person by nature. I'm just one of those people that likes to talk. Like Dudley will tell you, I'll talk to the cows come home. And it is so important that there is that representation, particularly for our younger generations. That's why we're struggling to recruit the younger carers, because our community has changed. It's no longer white Caucasian, it's a mix. So, and there's a lot of mixed, individuals that are coming from different backgrounds. I would like to see that where we've got boards and where we've got senior leadership, it is diverse and it is showing where we're going as a country. Because as a country, we're no longer going to be the norm of what it used to be. And I struggled with that. And one of the things I would like to say is when you're at the top and you are meeting the housekeeper, kindness is free. If you're kind to that person, you're already embedding that culture of saying you take care of each other as individuals, and that's one of the things that I keep pushing. Dudley, sorry, I cut you off.
No. I think it's fantastic. So I'm gonna bore everyone with having to be in rooms like you said, and having to deal with this subject, which once you get to a certain stage, you find you look around, you're the only one there who looks like you. And I always I say it's the illusion of inclusion, because a lot of these organizations will tell you, you know, we're really inclusive. And once you get inside of them, it's an illusion. Adam has just picked up and looked at the board, but yet CQC will be the ones telling you about how inclusive you should be, but yet they're not practicing themselves. There is a big illusion and myth there. And I think I always say when I speak to people, the lack of cultural competence or intelligence creates a barrier to effective communication. So it means that if you're telling people various things and they can't relate to you, then you're going to struggle. And these are missed opportunities to provide open conversations, interventions, and this could lead down even to the bottom for the patient sort of care. So I think it's important to apply when we're looking at having representation when we're looking at our boards and higher up the ladder. And that goes back down to when we're recruiting, looking about those sort of practices in place, which are hugely important.
Yeah.
And you know, and so I'll leave Paula in, because I know Paula.
Yeah, no, because this is where I'm at, and this is where, in order to get that inclusion in the boards up there, we need to start on the ground floor with being totally inclusive with our ground floor workforce. Because if we bring in people in and they don't feel included, they don't feel they belong, they don't feel they've got the opportunities, they will just leave and go somewhere else. So therefore, we haven't got them in that career ladder ready to take those steps to the top. So I think the most important work that we can do to get inclusion at the top is to make sure our workforces, you know, everybody understands what inclusion is. It's not just, as Dudley says, ticking a box, and as Vivian says, doing the online training, having the policy. It's leading by example. It's those leaders talking to everybody in their workforce, having an open door for everybody. One of the things that I am concerned about when we talk about inclusion and disability, we see a lot of managers saying, "Oh, this member of staff is off with their mental health." Now we know mental health and is can be a disability, but what we have to empower managers to do is that tolerance for poor sickness, one-off sickness practices, isn't inclusion, because you can exclude other people by just allowing poor sickness management. But if somebody has got a problem, that's when your management needs to be inclusive and say, okay, let's investigate this. How can we make reasonable adjustments for you? And that's whether it's neurodiversity, a physical disability, like, you know, I had one person recently, they had a limp, so they weren't allowed to work upstairs because it would have been dangerous for them sort of coming down. So if we're talking about inclusive in all areas, we're a marvelous industry for it, because we've got so many avenues of work: the kitchen, domestics, you know, maintenance, caring, admin. There's something for everybody in the care sector.
Absolutely.
I
And it's that
agree.
sensitivity, isn't it? Sorry, Adam. There's that sensitivity that comes with educating your whole team around why that individual has had that flexibility or allowance. Because often what happens is you make that allowance and it stays in the manager's office. Nobody else is aware of it. So what other people are seeing is them not getting the same privilege per se. So when privilege is allowed, I think it's that communication piece for everybody, so that they understand why maybe this slight change, obviously making sure that you're within employment law and all that kind of stuff, why this change has been allowed for that individual.
And I think that then gives the manager more influence in the staff, because the staff will see that actually it's not really a privilege, it's an adjustment, so that
Absolutely.
person is equal. And if the staff can be assured that their manager treats people with equity, that if ever anything happens to them, they can also be guaranteed of equitable treatment, and that then is good for retention and for that culture.
I agree. I think for me, this idea of reasonable adjustments is correct and is right, but I always, for me personally, feel like we leave reasonable adjustments until it's too late. So we wait until an adjustment is needed to go, right, how can we make you feel included? Whereas I think what we need to be doing is, let's use digital social care planning. Really easy one for us to envision. So digital social care planning, I'm going to introduce this into my service. It's going to be really, really great because people will just log on, complete it, and they can do the care plans. Wonderful. We could do that, or we could sit there and go, right, we're going to introduce digital social care planning. So what are the barriers that some people might face when using it? So we might have people with dyslexia. We might have people with language barriers. We might have people with X, Y, and Z. Brilliant, right? So those are our sort of things. We need to find a system that works for everybody, so that when we introduce it, everyone is instantly included. And then should we need to make additional adjustments for people, at least we know they are things that are probably extraordinary that we can then really put our focus on. So why don't we just make everything inclusive to start, instead of having to make those adjustments later on down the line when somebody joins us? And then, like you say, Paula, we can make those reasonable adjustments. It's things like, let's think maternity, being pregnant, protected characteristic, hugely beautiful miracle of life. And yet we wait until someone's pregnant to go, right, how can we make work better for you? And actually, why don't we tell people what we do for people who are pregnant to start off with? So if you are pregnant, this is everything that we can do for you. If none of that works, if you become pregnant, don't worry about it, because we'll have a look at your circumstance individually. But please be rest assured, if you do get pregnant, we will congratulate you, maybe for you a baby shower. But we're also going to make sure work works with you. Not you're not going to fit in with us. We are going to work around you, and we're going to make work for you. And then that means everyone then is instantly like, I'm going to join this company because they really care about the people. That seems to be missing in a lot of organizations, or am I getting it wrong?
Well, I mean, Adam, you've brought a bee in my bonnet, so no, in a nice way. But I think it's when I speak about the Equality Act, it was made in 2010. And if you think about, you talked about, maternity, but there are no paternity rights there. Fathers aren't included already in the law itself. It already negates men. And we talk about characteristics. So already we're looking, how can we include those who aren't involved on the legal parameters under the Equality Act 2010. So I think for me, it's about looking beyond that. And a lot of the things when I speak about and things I write a lot about is around having a culture-centered care approach. And culture-centered care approach is slightly different and similar to something like person-centered care, but this one is understanding people's cultures first, because if you understand someone's culture, whether they are LGBTQIA, whether they're African, they're Black, they have a disability, once you understand someone's culture, then you can administer a more person-centered care. And if that's a natural thing, it helps us, whether someone is neurodiverse, whether they need support, because you are actually getting to the actual main cultural element of them. So for me, I speak a lot about culture-centered care, because if you understand someone's culture, you're able to do as much as you can to support them. It covers a blanket over everything that we're just avoiding. So for me, it's hugely important to understand that.
No, absolutely. Thank you very much. I think I'm conscious of time. We've got about 20 minutes left. So I want to talk about change management, because I was listening to one of you talk earlier around the high turnover of staff, and it got me thinking about new managers and conversations that we've had in the past around change management, and then about how we can maintain these inclusive cultures once we've embedded them. Just quickly, listening to you, Adam, talk about the CQC board, I think actually when you look at the last staff survey that the CQC did and released into the public domain, actually it was shockingly bad. All the figures around culture, around lead, all of it was shocking. If that was my services, I'd be I'd actually be devastated. So I think the frontline staff in those operational teams actually feel it within the CQC, and you can type it in, you can find it. It's publicly available. And Vivian, you mentioned around acknowledging that cleaner and embedding that from the start. And I think we do need to, as a society, remove that job snobbery. I don't know where that's come from.
Exactly.
Like if somebody's doing a job, they're doing a job.
Yeah.
We all play a part. And I think in my work, I'm a regional manager. The amount of times I'm sat in one of the offices and somebody thinks that I work in IT, and the amount of times people say, well, they should know who you are. It doesn't bother me whether people think I'm IT. It doesn't bother me whether people think I'm a frontline care. I'm me, and we're all there to do a job, and the end goes to support the people that we're supporting. So, yeah, I see it all the time on social media about people saying, "Oh, I really like this person, but it gives me the ick because they work at Great or wherever it is that they work." And I think actually, they're paying towards society. They're paying their taxes. You know, they've got a living. It shouldn't matter where people work. So coming back to kind of that change management process. So there'll be people listening tonight that think, oh, actually, I'd really love to embed that, but they might have some resistance maybe from their senior leadership team, or they might have some resistance from their frontline operational staff, you know, with the changes they're bringing in. What advice do you have on how you can guide people and bring them through and overcome that kind of resistance? I'll come to you first, Paula.
The first thing I would do is observe. Absolutely, just take time to observe and take note of what behaviours, what attitudes that you think are damaging that chance of inclusion, and then work on those. And I'm sure Vivian and Dudley have got lots of ideas, but that's where I would start and be that example.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I definitely agree. You need to observe first and take notice of actually what's happening, what's embedded in that organisation already that needs to change. Vivian, any ideas, tips from you?
I think for me, it's one of the things I always struggle with, because obviously I'm in operations, and it's more of a just making sure everything functions well, and also a commercial arm. So it's all about the commercialization of the organization. How can you get the best outcomes as well? And that balancing of inclusivity and performance can be an issue at times. So, you know, a good example that I have that I found really helpful was the Alzheimer's Society. They're such a big organization, but they have shown that they always involve their employees when they're making any big decisions. So you talked about digital care planning. I would believe if they were an organization that needed to do that, they would bring in people that would have input into making the decision of the tool that they're going to use. Therefore, the impact assessment at the beginning of the journey takes into account all these different elements that would make it a success at the end. Because there's no point in embarking on a journey and not understanding what are going to be the barriers to it being finished properly. Furthermore, I think, you know, the resistance to change is often because people don't know. They genuinely don't know, you know. You've been living in your bubble, you've been plodding along, and suddenly somebody comes and says, well, you need to change. You need to think of Vivian because, you know, she's Black and she's from Zimbabwe and she's like this and she's like that. And I'm like, what? Why? You know, so it's about thinking about how those uncomfortable conversations can be had in a comfortable space, and people can feel free to say, I genuinely do not know how to interact with this issue. How do I help you? You're LGBTQAI. What does that mean for you? What change can I make for you in myself? And what can you make in yourself to embrace who I am so that we come to a middle ground? And as leaders, we are often stuck because we have got our own, and I think about my grandmother and what my grandmother used to tell me when I was a kid. You can't do that, you can't do this, you can't do that. We've got our grandmothers often reminding us you can't do that, but actually I need to get rid of my grandmother, take the wisdom from her, but apply it so that I'm embracing everybody and using that to create visions and goals. And I go back to the vision and goal setting. It has to revolve each and every time. It can't be that you set a vision this month and then you say, oh, in 12 months' time, it's the same thing. It will have changed because your team will have changed and they'll have evolved. There'll be different people then. So how do we do that? And I often consult with my colleagues, including Dudley, around, so what can we do different? You know, is there anything we can do differently that will change the vision and goals? Or how we prescribe it or how we enact it, how we execute it. There always needs that constant conversation. And that needs to be a live conversation, not one that's stagnant or based on the leader's perspective on life, because you're not the oracle on how to look after each other in our communities.
No, thank
Can
you.
I
And I
just
love the
come in
fact.
just
Oh, go on.
very quickly
Go
and just play a little bit of devil's advocate, come in, say, like, from my community? Do you feel, Vivian, that there is also a part of the embedding culture of this diverse culture that we all want? Do you think there's also a tiny part where one of the barriers is where people from a minority or from a protected group, like myself or yourself, don't allow people to get things wrong? And
Yes.
sometimes we just get so angry and it's like, I can't believe you've said that. That is so wrong and you're not allowed to do that. And it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. I'm trying to learn. There's a difference between getting something wrong once and microaggressions. I totally understand
Yes.
that. And we don't want to create an avenue for microaggressions to
Yeah.
creep in. I'll use something that I'm familiar with, which is pronouns and people's pronouns, and
Yeah.
completely misgendering someone constantly. Wrong. Misgendering someone wrong once or twice or maybe 3 times because you've forgotten or you slip up, fine. You start self-checking yourself. But I think as protected groups, we also need to be a bit more, everything's changing. And it does feel like overnight on a lot of this. The LGBT community literally just blossomed within a 3-year period and everything just transformed massively.
Yeah.
I am still struggling with it. I'm trying to keep on top of it and trying to educate myself. And luckily, my close circle allow me to get things wrong. But I know people who don't allow you to get things wrong, and then it sort of closes people off. So, how do we approach that? How do we bring that culture in with us to go? It's okay to get stuff wrong. We're going to work with you on this.
I mean, I find this quite interesting, and this is one of the things that really I've sort of struggled with. There's been a lot of transition in how to incorporate different characteristics, and terminology. I get all the time. Can I say this, Dudley? Can that be said? Is this wrong? Is this right? And I think it's a forever learning curve. And I think it's about within organizations, and there's a lot of SMEs in obviously social care, is actually creating a room where you can get people to learn, but not in the way where, as you talk about, is, classroom style. It's actually interactive, putting them in scenarios and situations. What happened if this came across? A lot of the training I do is around scenarios and situations and having knowledge. And it's quite interesting because a lot of international recruits at the moment, when I talk about LGBTQIA plus, a lot of them, they're like, they haven't got a clue where to start. But actually understanding, I say, would you understand that, but almost 50% of the people being cared for feel as if they're being discriminated because of they're from LGBTQIA community. How would you feel if you were, for example, from a gender point of view or a race point of view? How would you feel if people judge you upon that? So it's trying to remove those barriers first and foremost, and then you meet them of how can we focus. And I think the wonderful thing, and I've trained outside of the sector, and one thing we have in care, which is really important, is to the person we're caring for at the end result is how do we make their life a lot better. So therefore, if it's learning about things they like, how they like their name to be pronounced, the food they eat, the clothes they wear, I think it's important of understanding the individual. As I said, going back to that culture thing, you get to understand. And I always say to them, the more we know, the less we fear. So having more conversations, monthly meetings within your workplace about understanding the differences. I would say, you talked about the board, have someone with lived experience on the board. So actually people get to know the reality of a situation, not, oh, I didn't understand, Dudley, that you can't get a taxi cab. Oh, I didn't know this. But actually lived experience means that people in the workplace get to relate to you. And I think we all know, we're all, I think, people that we can relate to here. We can feel comfortable in speaking to each other. The mental health, explaining like the open door policy. So having a more inclusive environment means that we're able to share things, we're able to learn a lot more from each other. And actually, before we go out into the big bad world and make that dreaded mistake, we actually understand the layout of the land. So it's really important to be able to say, okay, I need this support, or speak to fellow colleagues of, explain this to me so I can understand, because it's not my culture. And this is going to be happening a lot, especially with the overseas staff being in different parts of the country. There was a famous one where some overseas staff were told to cook some had to prepare sandwiches, and they didn't realize that meat was ever cold. They put the sandwiches in the microwave because they didn't understand the culture of meat in a cold sandwich. Or even things like that are small, but understanding it really helps us. And from now this point of view, they now know about.
Yeah.
I recently had someone in a service where I'm working, a relative complained because a care worker didn't toast a pintlet, because it was bread. They thought they just gave it to them cold. So it's little things like that. And I honestly, truly believe starting with the little foundational things, it blooms and blossoms to big inclusive cultures. But you have to be proactive. If you walk into a culture, I mean, when I was in the NHS, we went across 44 homes, and you could tell within seconds of walking in what the culture is in that environment. So if you're a manager and you're aware of a non-inclusive culture, if you've got cliques that sit in separate ends of the staff room, start just by including everybody together, sit at the table, get everybody together for lunch, do a special buffet, do some games and things. You can start small, and it will soon break down barriers, and that way you can grow.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be big.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Adam?
I was going to say, very, very quickly, just going from what you were saying, Paul, about walking into a service and then knowing it straight away, knowing what the culture is. There was an episode of Doctor Who this weekend, so apologies if you're not a geek like me. I really don't care. It was a great episode. And I'm really, really sorry if you haven't watched it. So #spoilers, as River Song would say. But the entire episode happened, and you were rooting for the main character of the episode until the very, very end. Now, a lot of people are like, oh, this came out of the blue and blah, 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 because we all know now that the Doctor is a very beautiful, very handsome, suave black man who is, he's already my number one favorite Doctor. I am hands down with Hugh Jackman. I think he's great. He's a brilliant actor, brilliant. Anyway, he's a black Doctor. And everyone was like, well, it came out of the blue at the end, because the end, he says, come with me, I'll save you all. You can all come with me, come in my ship, and I'll take you away. And they're like, no. We didn't mind talking to you, but we can't be around someone like you, basically, because he's black and we can't have you around us. And it's a very sort of shocking racist moment. And there's a lot of people online going, oh my God, I can't believe this. Me, social care, sat there watching it, and you see all the faces of all the characters, because it's in like the social media world. Everyone's white in it. And I'm sat there right with my partner going, something odd here. It's like an Aryan race society. Everyone's just white. There's going to be a huge twist at the end around racism. And I think online we can see the people who aren't used to having inclusive cultures around them because they are still colorblind. They are still seeing, and they don't notice the lack of diversity in scenarios. And I think not that we should criticize those people, but we should be able to recognize those people within our workforce. And they are the ones that we really need to do that work with as well. So if they don't notice that actually everyone they're looking at just looks like themselves and no one else, maybe we need to do a bit of work there to educate them. But if you haven't watched it, I would watch Doctor Who this last weekend. Cotton Bubble, I think it was called. Absolutely incredible episode, and a powerful sort of meaning at the end. And I just wanted to link it to what you were saying then, Paula, around being able to recognize straight away. And I think we should all be proud of ourselves that we can do that. Vivian, I interrupted you again. I'm going to put myself on mute.
You've absolutely fed into what I wanted to say, because one of the things that I think people struggle with is when somebody does show you that they have some form of bias, is having that conversation with them, because you immediately have this, you're fronting me. Why are you doing that? But actually having the mindset, and I go back, it comes from the leaders. If the leader finds there's an issue and there's somebody who's got an issue, the first thing is don't take them through disciplinary or capability, because what is that going to solve? They're just going to move on to the next organization and do the same thing. Have that open conversation, and have a conversation that reflects back, because often the conversation is between me and the person and nobody else. Actually have a conversation with everybody and say, look, let's talk about this. what is the main issue? You know, in that Doctor Who episode, I watched the last bit because I was dying like Mark, and I managed to live, I think, somehow, by some lucky streak. I think Doctor Who saved me. Oh, he saved me. He's so handsome. But, you know, when you think about it, in that situation, what could have been done? Because I kept on asking myself, so how can you turn this around? Probably you'd have struggled being Doctor Who, because you're thinking, oh, there's all these people, they're all against me. But starting a conversation with one person, it's always finding who's that, because there's a main protagonist in everything. Speaking to that person and not necessarily changing their mind, but planting the seed and then changing everybody around them, their minds as much as possible, will eventually lead to that person beginning to, you know, to say, okay, there might be something wrong with what I'm doing. And I will have a story of myself. When I joined an organization about 20 years ago, I went into a home where it was predominantly white. I was taking over from a white female manager, and there was this black girl who's coming in, and they literally called me, "You black girl, you've come in to tell us what to do." And I said, "Great." I didn't fight them. I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring you some Zimbabwean food, and I don't care what you're going to say about it. You're going to eat it. And then afterwards, and Adlia and I talk about this exchange of food as a medium of communicating and get to know each other. And from then on, it was very simple. You know, some of them are, oh, I didn't like that sada stuff. It's horrible. I don't like it. I said, it's fine. I eat it all the time, and I eat it with my hands. You know, but I was me. I didn't feel affronted by it. So there's a lot about just making it comfortable for people to say, I don't like you, but teach me how to like you. And, you know, you can, sorry, Paula.
Sorry. One of the things that I've used in the past when I was a manager is if you see someone that's being excluded a little bit more, you as a manager attach to them. And before you know, everybody wants to know the manager's friend. You know, it's using that reverse psychology on people just to get people out of their bubble. So
I think it's hugely important. I think sometimes we make things very complex because, you know, the subject can be quite toxic. It can really be hard to sort of tackle. And I see a lot of managers freezing or thinking, oh, we don't want to get done here. So I think it's really trying to make it very simple. So in a lot of the training I do, especially with international staff, but even is actually my name is, it's an app, which how you pronounce someone's name, it breaks it down phonetically. So it means that a lot of the time, you know, we always love to try and guess a name and we butcher it so badly. And it's like, but actually this breaks it down. And not only does it help, so when someone gets to know your name, actually they feel that they have a relationship more so that they can speak to you, understanding that name, your culture, where's that name from? And it's quite funny because I'll tell this is that a lot of overseas staff struggle with the English names more so as well. So actually getting that breakdown for them really helps. As I always say when I'm always training, people end up always calling me Doodly, which I don't know how, but actually it does happen. So breaking it down, and that begins the starting point. And once we start beginning to know each other, the barriers are broken down. You find out a lot more. And I think it's making it very simple rather than overcomplicating it, because it ends up being quite toxic, and we're trying to avoid that.
I quite like the name Doodly. I might call you that from now on.
Can I just?
One of you had a. Oh, go on, Paula.
Sorry, because I know we're coming out of time. I went to a business meeting this morning, Warwickshire Council, and apparently they have an inclusive support fund through the council to help people into work. So that might be another avenue, a practical avenue, when you're looking at disabilities, for care homes to look at their local councils if they want to support somebody into work. Sorry, that was just while it came into my head.
No, that's okay. And I know Essex, where I am, do a fantastic job at inclusive employment. So if anybody kind of wants to network here, it's definitely a great place to start. Thank you for that, Paula. I was going to say, one of you had an alarm set. You were very on the ball on keeping us under time. Don't know who it was. I've got one question, and then I promise I'll let you all go. Just want one tip from each of you around how you maintain an inclusive culture. And also, if you haven't got anybody in your organisation with that lived experience, what is the value and the importance of using somebody from external as opposed to using free resources or just winging it and hoping that you get it right? Vivian, I'm going to come to you first.
For me, there's a couple of things that I really value. Is I like ongoing feedback direct to myself. Nobody should feel that they cannot tell me how they're feeling. And it's how I then go and have those conversations with the direct line managers in terms of how we can change the way they're being supported. And I also say, the satisfaction surveys truly have to be truly anonymous, because one of the issues I struggle with is most of them feel that somebody's, there's Big Brother out there who's going to see what I've just said. We've embedded that, and that's really helped because we're getting the true picture out there. But the last thing that I find often is a problem is, how do you measure success? And how do you report back to your teams? Because that community needs to understand that the little things that you're doing are making a difference, and it's incremental. And I think that it's finding the right type of reporting. And at the moment, I can't see anything, because CQC have got it in the new framework, but they haven't given us anything that says this is how you report it, this is how you measure your success, this is how you show your plans of how you're going to make it better. So I'm hoping that, as a group of people, Dudley, Paula, since we've started having this conversation, let's think about creating a tool that measures how culture is actually being embedded and how it's being maintained, and also what are the steps you can do to keep revamping, because it needs to revamp. You can't have a stagnant conversation about culture. It's impossible. You're not going to maintain it. You have to keep thinking and having that conversation and saying, okay, I need to rethink this again, because our society is forever changing now. There's a time when I came into, I don't know about pronouns, I'll be honest. And somebody told me there's a them, and I was like, what does them mean? And somebody told me, and I understood it, and I said, oh, okay, I get it. But again, that was because I had to re-ask the question and rehash the conversation. So I would say feedback, making sure you've got a live action plan on how you do it and embedding it and executing it properly. And you yourself being that person that is inclusive. Yourself. You're first, you as a human being, looking after another human being. That's the most important thing to me.
Thank you. Completely agree. Dudley, over to you.
Oh, thank you very much. I think it's an interesting subject, and how do we sustain? I think Vivian mentioned, how do we measure it? I think keeping things simple by really looking around you. I always speak to managers and say, have a blank piece of paper and see how inclusive your organization is. So you can write down the things that you can do, maybe what's missing. Have role plays in. Also practice things which I call as allyship, which is really important, which means that someone who doesn't get the opportunity to speak often, they get a chance to play a role in it. Collaboration as well is also, if you know your service doesn't work well from an inclusive point of view, maybe looking locally of other sort of providers who really work well from an inclusive point of view, because, we always like to know what good looks like. We know the famous line. So a lot of people say, well, I just didn't know. Well, what happened? Try and get a Vivian in, get a Dudley in, an Adam in, find out their experiences, because it really hits home when they actually see the human side of things. I think it's helping us to really develop further. And I always say, when I do my training, is if you're looking about hiring for cultural add, how can you then look about actually embedding better things in your services? Have a look around, be more diverse when you're bringing people into the workplace, but don't just bring them in and say tick box. Actually make them more inclusive. Things around Christmas time, don't just have turkey on the plate, have other dishes from other cultures that people can bring in, so we can all have a lovely, wonderful taste of all the wonderful food globally. So things like that are really important. I always will say that it's a subject which runs through the veins of all our organizations. Just like technology, diversity and inclusion is really important, and I think that's really human-centered.
Thank you very much. Paula?
I think to maintain a culture, you've got to mostly reward good practice and then not tolerate bad practice. Just nip it in the bud and redirect people. And I think if you really are in a place where there's no diversity in your area and in your demographic, we're all within a few miles of multicultural towns and cities, wherever we are in the UK. So I think, looking, like Dudley says, at training, at activities for the residents, bring in a Caribbean band or a Bollywood dancer, something like that, just to touch on that inclusivity, to get your staff and your residents, because again, inclusivity, discrimination can be from your clients, not just from your staff, and that one is a more difficult thing to handle, where it shouldn't just be brushed under the carpet.
No, absolutely. And we definitely need a zero tolerance policy in place regardless. Adam, I'm going to come to you in a second, but Vivian, I know you want to just mention something, so fire away.
Okay, thanks. There's a book that I read about, I think 3-4 years ago, called The Loudest Duck, Moving Beyond Diversity Whilst Embracing Differences to Achieve Success, by Laura Listwood. It was really, really insightful. It just talked about how different voices will either be missed out or not heard because there are certain people that are loud. People like myself, I will say I don't like it. Somebody else will not say it. But that book helped just to understand how different cultures feed into that mechanism and how people interact with you. So I would recommend anybody looking for a good book just to understand how the diversity space works around culture. Read that book. It's really insightful.
Can I just add very quickly, going on your point of understanding that culture, also as well, we come from all different parts of this country alone, let alone globally. It's actually allowing people to actually bring their authentic selves to work and understand them. And then rather than chastising them, let's see how we can work with them and bringing them into the workplace rather than ostracizing them and calling them, you can't do this because, let's think about how we sort of use our words, because the words are really hugely important and they can make a difference between someone staying and going.
Ties us nicely into positive culture and learning, which we've discussed. I've shared the link in the comments to the book that Vivian recommended. That's not an affiliate link. I feel like I should probably get an Amazon affiliate. You can also, if you type that into Google, you can buy it secondhand for like £2. £5 I saw, but I just thought I'd share the Amazon because everybody seems to have an account. Adam, any tips from you? Sorry. You're on mute. Penny in the jar.
It had to happen, didn't you, by the end?
Luckily, you can't hear that, so I can't get sued by YouTube or whatever it is for swearing when I put non-explicit content. What I was saying is, if you are using Amazon, download it on your Kindle, save the shipping, save the planet. We are trying to be sustainable, although I use Amazon all the time. It's terrible. Mm-hmm. I think for me, it's around... we're listening to Dudley. I'm doing it now. That name is going to stick, Dudley. I can't get rid of it. I think when it comes to celebrating, like you were saying, Christmas and not just having the same sort of meat on the menu, don't just celebrate Christmas. Come on, celebrate everything. There are so many glorious holidays out there. One of my favorite being Diwali. I mean, I've got a home in Leicester, and the Festival of Lights, is stunning. We should be celebrating all cultures, no matter what. I would say, and I'm going to say this, and I know people will probably snigger at this because it seems so insignificant and trivial in the grandest scheme of things, but it's around stopping with the jokes. And I think we've gotten so used to saying things that, like, we will say, someone will go, "Oh, I'm going to the hairdressers later on today. You don't need to bother with them anymore, do you, Adam?" I'm like, well, I've got thick skin. It don't bother me. But actually, for a lot of people out there, and I'm not going to just say men, for a lot of people out there who have baldness genes and are losing their hair, it's a very sensitive thing. And actually, that provides them with this sense of, oh, this culture judges me here. I'm judged in this building for my appearance. You would never say to someone, oh, I'm going to the chipulator. You shouldn't go though, should you, salad? You wouldn't say that to people. It's just rude and it's wrong. And we should be embracing people for who they are. So stop with the jokes. And I love with Paula's comments around bringing, the diversity in the home. And I would say that's most important when the diversity doesn't exist internally as well. So we have a lot of people who go, well, our area is not that diverse and I don't have that demographic, so I can't hire these people of different colors. Wrong. Absolutely wrong. Bring that diversity into your home and showcase to people that you're embracing that diversity, because you will be surprised how quickly you will start employing people from other cultures and other areas, because they will go, this organization care. This organization get it. They understand and they're showcasing it. Do what you can. You know, the world is not vanilla. The world is a rainbow, and we should be embracing all the different vibrancies of the world and just bring them in. If you can start doing it with it not being a case of, I've done this now, I'm going to tick off my quality statement for the CPC. If you can do this and truly mean it and truly care, you'll laugh and you will have the most beautiful workforce, the most beautiful client base in the world. So I would just say crack on and be good people.
Absolutely.
Mind shift action, I say. Mind shift action. Mind shift action. So make sure.
Mind shift action. It's a really good saying, Dublin. Really good saying. I'm sorry. The other thing that I would say as well is encourage and support people to use their names. I mean, so many people will go, blah, 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 this is my name, but you can just call me Steve. And I'm like, do you like being called Steve? Because I do not mind practicing saying your name. I do not mind doing that. You are a person and I should respect you. I'm not just going to call you Steve because it's easy for me. Life isn't easy. It shouldn't be easy for me. So encourage people to use their own names. Encourage your team to embrace it as well. I hear so many names getting mispronounced constantly, and it's a microaggression, and we cannot have them in our workforce. But we should also be supporting people to be who they are. Changing their name to fit us devalues them as a person, and it's just wrong. It is just wrong. We need to change that as part of our culture. You asked for one, Mark. I gave 4. I do apologize.
No, that is okay. That is okay. I think for me, we need to be reviewing it on a regular basis. And I think we've spoken about this with the single assessment framework. You've got to get away from the annual staff survey. You need to be doing pulse surveys all the time, looking at actually what your staff want, what's working well, what's not working well, putting together an action plan. And I know we've spoken around it tonight, around kind of pride and awareness days. Don't just do something for likes on social media. If you're not actually truly embedding it in your culture, then don't do it. It's a bit like unpaid carer day. Like, actually, if you don't do anything for the unpaid carers in your organisation, you should be celebrating that day. I'm going to stop because I need to cough again. But Adam, I'm going to hand over to you.
I'll say very quickly, when it comes to authenticity, you know, I always relate to food. If it doesn't have that flavor and taste, people soon realize that it's not genuine. So make sure it's got that right flavor. I'll leave you with that one.
100%. Look, it's been an absolutely great show tonight, and it's something that I've just loved it. I've been on holiday to Cornwall, been an absolutely beautiful journey down there. If I had the money and the time and I didn't have to work for a living, I would go and move there in a heartbeat. Beautiful, beautiful part of the country, really connected with it. And I just want to leave you, if you are going to go to Cornwall, visit the Biome Kitchen there. In the Eden Project. So the Eden Project, wonderful conservationist project, turned a quarry into just a beautiful piece of land. The Biome Kitchen is full of people working there, living with disabilities, and it's the most amazing kitchen.
Wow.
And it is fantastic. And there are people being supported. I mean, when I was there, my plates were collected by a lady in a wheelchair who was being pushed by somebody else as well. And they were a working partnership within this kitchen. Beautiful practice of diversity all in one place, and it's not done as a gimmick. It is a kitchen all about Earth. It's all about the planet. It's all about, you know, being connected. Wonderful place, and I think we just need to start doing more of that in our lives. We just need to be nice. We just need to be kinder. We need to be nice. Oh, this has been. I was worried at the beginning. My internet was a bit dodgy, and I thought I'm not going to be able to last the entire show. I am so glad that I have, because this conversation has been invigorating. It has been soul nourishing. It has been absolutely wonderful. So, Paula Dudley, we'll get your name correct. I won't use a microaggression or Dudley. However, do expect that in the future. Vivian, Mark, it has been an absolute pleasure having you all here, hearing your stories. And hearing your angles on this topic. And again, this is a topic that we will have discussed at all times on this show. It's something that we bring up wherever we can. The Caring View is about all angles, and we will continue to have this conversation. This has been The Caring View, www.thecaringview.co.uk. You can catch all of our episodes on YouTube. You can catch them all on our website. You can get our podcast on a myriad of sites now, so please do go and check them out. Huge shout out to Prosperwell, CBAT, and Attis Care by Attis Insurances for making this possible for us. We will continue to do The Caring View as long as there are people who need this and who want this, and we are, I mean, we've nearly peaked at 100 again live tonight. This doesn't include LinkedIn viewership. And we're grateful. I know there's a debate around who's going to become our next clown in the office. So I'm really, really glad you are all here listening and talking with us tonight. We do appreciate it. We are completely free. www.thecaringview.co.uk. Until then, we will see you next week. Have a good evening. Stay safe, and we will see you soon. Thank you all again.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Nice.